So, welcome to the video blog for June. We're recording a little early, but you know, full moon, all of that. So, with me is Ginger, as always. She's waving, you can't see her. Yeah, we'll just go straight into it.
So continuing our conversation on the Norse mythology, Natara, I remember you saying something very interesting about Odin and his hall, Valhalla, and the entrance to it, and the wolves over the door. Can you talk about that and what all that means?
Oh God, I'm supposed to remember detail. Let's see if he'll just give it to me because it's not being held in my head. So, the entrance to Odin's Hall is essentially an allegory for initiation. The initiation of the warrior, the initiation into that next level of evolution, the initiation into the hallowed hall. The wolves are wolves symbolize so many things, but in this particular case, what I get is that they symbolize the fact that we have to confront our own fear in order to walk through what the Tibetans call bardo, that transitional space from life into death, and then from death into life again. We have to confront our fears. You know, one of the reasons that the Tibetans have such a strong tradition, I realize you didn't ask me about Tibet, but this is where we're going apparently. The reason that the Tibetans have such a strong tradition of, or Buddhism in general, but especially the Bonpo, have such a strong tradition of training and repetition and chant and all of that, is preparing you for that transition so that you know what to do. Because what happens for most people when they pass, when they cross over, is that they're moving from something that feels like dreaming into something that has felt like dreaming. And so there's this very thick sort of veil that they go through, and there's a lot of forgetting that happens. And if you don't train yourself very strongly through repetition, it can be a very scary experience. But if you have ingrained it strongly enough as to what's going to happen and how to conduct yourself and the energy to hold in your mind, then it becomes a smooth transition and it's not scary. And so, you know, in the Norse tradition, people who get to go hang with Odin, you know, have died gloriously. And so they're good at confronting that sort of fear, you know, or putting that sort of fear aside, which is really the way of the warrior. You know, and you look at how soldiers are trained, you know, going through boot camp and all of that. So much of that training is to teach you to just do the job without feeling the fear, with being able to put that fear aside and just do the job, because that is what a warrior must do. Which brings up all sorts of interesting ideas about what a spiritual warrior really is. You know, if you are a spiritual warrior, it's not that you're going off and doing battle necessarily, but you are putting your fear aside and walking into the unknown with courage and a certain level of fierceness to confront that unknown. Anyway, so getting back to Odin. Apparently today is a day of tangents. I blame the Sagittarius moon. So the warrior who's going to join Odin has confronted or put aside their fear of the battle, but now they're walking into something that they may not have had training for at all. Okay. And that is the unknown. And because they've crossed through this veil, everything that they used to know about Odin, they may not know any longer. He's yelling at me. Odin, sorry. And so those wolves can be viewed either as protectors or as something fearful. And it may simply be, for that warrior, it may be a trigger to put them back into that place of, I know what to do when I'm in fear. So that they walk in with that dignity and that courage and that fierceness, because you don't present yourself to Odin from a place of fear. It seems rather unwise. So, does that answer the question?
It does. I remember you said something about a moat as well.
Yeah, no, there's this whole moat and there's stuff, and I have somewhere in my head all of this book learning about what all of the symbolism is. Odin's not really handing it to me right now. He's like, yeah, symbolism, whatever. It's all part of the stories, and stories aren't necessarily who he really is. The stories are good for teaching people how to be, and for teaching people about their journey, and for teaching people about aspiration, and what's the word I want? Archetypes and aspiration, who they should aspire to be. But unless you are following Odin in this lifetime, in this time and place, it's not always as useful. Other than saying that what's much more pertinent to our daily lives in this time and in this place are the stories about wisdom and about what are you willing to sacrifice for wisdom. Battle is so very old school for now, and while the spiritual warrior is still important, even as a spiritual warrior, at least the current understanding of that archetype is one that puts us, it doesn't allow us to be present to our feelings, and that's super important right now. This idea of immanence as opposed to transcendence, that I think I've talked about before, is much more important. We need to be here now, be here to whatever is coming up, and especially during this Mercury retrograde in Gemini. There's just so much urging from Spirit to be here now, to not let yourself get taken out of the now, to be present to whatever's coming up, to not even attach stories to whatever old feelings are coming up, to just have the feelings and don't try to think about, well, what is this and why am I not getting pictures with this, or what are these pictures that I'm getting. Just be there. Be there and process them. The only way you can process is to be present to them. And even getting into our heads and trying to figure out what it's about and what the story is and what triggered me and all of that is not helpful. Be in the body. Feel the physicality of whatever's coming up, and allow that to be enough.
This is an emotionally sensitive Odin.
I don't know. I don't know that it's emotionally sensitive. I think it's wise. There is a wisdom in knowing when it's time to do battle and when it's time to sit still. We had a little accent over here, cat induced. We're all good. You all right? Move your purse. Okay. We should keep going. You all right? Yeah. The Odin that was willing to hang from the tree, the Odin that was willing to give up his eye, is not necessarily the Odin that screams, go into battle. You know, it's the Odin who says there's a time and a place for everything, and what are you willing to sacrifice? And sometimes what we need to be willing to sacrifice in order to move forward is the idea, we have to be willing to sacrifice the idea that there is anything to be done. Sometimes you just have to sit in it. Sometimes you just have to hang from that tree and be there for it and not transcend it. Just be there for it. Be in it. And so it's not necessarily dissonant to me, you know, the Odin that's presenting himself. It's trade. It's not the Odin that most people think of when they tell Odin stories, but it is very much an Odin to me. You know, it's that wisdom. It's that, no, you gotta hang from the tree. You know, you want to be able to move forward. You want to be empowered. You want to have the information you need to have. Sit the fuck down. Be. Stop moving. Stop cleaning the house. Stop doing whatever it is you're doing to make yourself busy. Just be. You know, and it's interesting that this stuff is coming up right now because it is a full moon, or we're coming into full moon. And full moon to me frequently is a very outward sort of demonstrative time. You know, it's a time of action, and this full moon is not a time of action as far as I can tell. It's been very informational, but it's not very active, you know. And one of the reasons that we're doing this today is because the veil is very thin right now, because of the quality of this particular full moon. I mean, it's not as thin as it gets at Beltane and Samhain, but it's pretty darn thin, and everybody's kind of jabbering. And it's really interesting because I actually had to look up the solar activity today because I was trying to see if we were having solar flares, because there's so much jittery energy going on right now. And I think the jittery energy is just because we're being asked not to act, and what that produces for most people is nervous energy because they don't want to just sit still. And so it's an unusual full moon to me. So for an unusual full moon, you get an unusual Odin. See, brought it full circle.
So earlier you said, talking about what are we willing to sacrifice for wisdom. I know that is a big component in the Norse mythology, you know, sacrificing yourself unto yourself and all of that. I mean, what is Odin saying is an appropriate? I mean, what are appropriate sacrifices for wisdom? I mean, most of us
only you can know what your appropriate sacrifice is. But it's important to understand that a sacrifice is not an offering. A sacrifice is something you may not think you're done with yet. You know, I talk about this a lot when I talk about working with the element of fire, is fire demands a sacrifice, and you may not think you're done with that yet. That's what a sacrifice is. A sacrifice is you're giving up something important to you that you still value. You know, like an eye.
Well, most of us are not willing to give up an eye.
Sure. You know, and I don't think that the universe demands that we give up something that is still truly important to us. We just think it is because we have an ego attachment to it. You know, and so think about, you know, like, what do you have an ego attachment to that spirit, guidance, the gods, whatever, may be trying to suggest to you that, you know, really, it's time to put that down and move forward. You know, when you're trying to figure out what it is that is an appropriate sacrifice, one of the good exercises you can do is to sit down and actually do a releasing ritual, you know, where you name off everything you're releasing. And generally, the things on my list that I'm releasing are all ego attachments. I release my ego attachment. I release my attachment to being right. I release my attachment to having the right answers. I release my attachment to knowing. I release my attachment to the illusion of lack. You know, there are a lot of things that I have attachment to that hook me, that I think are important. And when I release those attachments, I get to see then what is important and what's not. And it changes my understanding of what I'm done with and what I'm not done with. And so in doing the releasing of the attachments, you are starting to make your sacrifice. I'm willing, once I release my attachments, I become much more willing to let go of those things that I was attached to. Excuse the grammar. But that's a place to start. If you're going, well, what do I sacrifice? What's an appropriate sacrifice? What the gods don't care. What the gods are saying is it's time to let go of some stuff. It's time to make room for new information, for new ways of being, for new thoughts, for new energies. And so it's time to get a clearer understanding of what you're done with, what no longer serves you. And the only way you can do that is to start to release your attachments. And there's an interesting symbolism to giving up an I in order to have writing. Because something happens to the brain when a culture shifts from being an oral tradition to having a written history. We start to process information differently, and we lose some of our attachment, or not attachment, but our connection to the collective unconscious, because that is where so much of that information is stored when you have an oral tradition. And so the collective unconscious, and the collective conscious for that matter, holds that information. It's essentially, another way of looking at it is everybody has a fairly strong line to the Akashic. There is a central repository for that information. It's a shared memory. And when you transition to writing, you start to lose that connection. And you start to lose the ability to learn information on a purely oral tradition. And you start to transition from cyclical time to linear time. And so you really are sort of sacrificing your ability to pierce the veil. Some of your ability to find that collective information, that collective repository, in order to have the ability to write things down and to have people read them. And to be clear, Odin's not saying let's go back to an oral tradition, because our brains don't work that way anymore, and learning to move into writing is much easier than learning to move back into an oral tradition. And it's not necessarily a requirement for the transition that we're going through on this planet. But it is time to let go of some of our ways of thinking, of separating from the shadow self, in order to be fully in immanence, in order to really connect with our inner divine self. We have to let go of a lot of that illusion of separation, a lot of that idea that spirit and wisdom and whatever else is out there somewhere. If the divine is everything, if we are cells in the body divine, then all of that information, all of that blueprint is contained within us, and we shouldn't have to look for that stuff outside of ourselves. We should find a way to connect with it inside of ourselves. And that means making friends with the shadow self. That means being present to all of the feelings that come up ever, And by being present to it, again, I mean being present to the physical sensations of it, not the head information about it, because the head will try to take you out of the body. Um, the head, which is really kind of the lower mental body, it's the third chakra, is where the illusions of fear and lack are generated. It's where the illusion of separation comes from. It's, yes, it's individualization and it's personality, but I truly believe that we can be who we are and still be connected to the all. We don't have to be in an illusion of separation. We can be in the truth of unification. But we have to start within ourselves and then move outward, as opposed to starting outward and moving inward. And ultimately, there is no in and out. It's all the same. The shamans are correct. Everything that's going on around us is a projection of what's going on inside of ourselves. This all is hologram. The only thing that's real is right here. And does that mean that you're real and I'm not, or I'm real and you're not? No. But that space in between us, what you experience is the space in between us, and what I experience is the space in between us, are... Can you get the cat off the table? Because otherwise she's going to move the camera.
Sure. Do you want to...
Careful with the camera. Anyway, how you experience the space in between us and how I experience the space in between us, is different, and it's not just a matter of perspective where you're over there and I'm over here. It's a matter of it all goes through your filters and all of the information that you carry and all of your past experience, and it really is a hologram. It's not a shared experience. There is never truly a shared reality, because everybody's reality is unique and subjective. And so there is no true reality. That's part of what scientists are coming up against when they deal with, some of that quantum physics stuff, where they're like, oh, you do a thing over here and a piece of whatever it was that you took and put way over here is reacting to that over here, because the space in between, the time in between, is the illusion. Unification is the truth. Time and space are part of the illusion of separation. Wow, that was a tangent. Sorry.
I know who I asked.
We should just start calling this series I Know Who I Asked.
I know who I asked. So getting back to the full moon and the Mercury retrograde that's going on right now, what is your advice for those of us who are, struggling with all the jittery energy and the anxiety and how that's affecting our loved ones? And
well, I blogged about this the other day. We're being asked two things in this Mercury retrograde, or we're being presented with two opportunities in this Mercury retrograde. And one is to be present to whatever's coming up, to be present to the emotions and the physical feelings, and to not seek to avoid them, and to not attach stories to them, to just be present to them. And the other thing that, the other opportunity that we're being presented with is simply to be super flexible. And I think that's part of being present to things. But it's that if a change comes up, like a scheduling change or whatever, and you react to it by taking it personally and by going, oh God, this is a big imposition and I'm uncomfortable now and whatever, you will continue to have snafus and continue to be uncomfortable and whatever. If instead you go, oh, okay, and you just sit for a moment, you'll see that what that was moving out of the way for was something much better to come through, and that everything works perfectly, and then the machine of the universe is working perfectly because you're not fighting it. And so as far as being supportive for those around us who are having a hard time with it, grounding, breathing, which are both things that will unconsciously affect the person that you're with or the person that you're feeling for. Being in compassion, holding space without taking on their stuff, because you're actually doing them a disservice by not letting them process as they need to process. And just doing your best to present with an attitude of none of this is a big deal. Because that helps them start to de-escalate. And if they can see that you are around them and the snafus are affecting you too, or whatever, and that you're just taking it in stride and nothing's a big deal and it's all totally fine and it'll all totally work out, they can start to emulate that. And they can start to shift their energy to match the resonance that you're holding. This is not a time where we get to help people by action. This is a time where we get to help people by holding the appropriate energy and allowing them to feel that. Essentially modeling, being an example. If someone is personally struggling with the energies that are going on, the best I can say is, shh, sit still, it'll be okay, just be. Processing for emotions and old stuff is not an action. It's just be in it. Breathe, be in it, don't try to change it, allow it, have compassion for yourself, and allow the shift to happen. We're definitely in a really strong shift right now. And the more we do to try to make things happen or fix things, the more we actually get in the way. This is really just sit back, sit on your raft, float down the stream. Don't work on course correction or anything else. Just be. Be present to whatever is coming up internally. And all of this, the hologram, will take care of itself. And what feels like it might be a tidal wave internally really isn't, as long as you stop fighting it. That which you fight, you feed. You're pushing energy at it. Just be. Let it wash over you and through you, and you'll be fine. Know that this time, the next few days, the veil is really thin, and we may get a lot of information from our higher guidance, but it's nothing that we need to go searching for. It's nothing that we need to be actively asking questions of. If you just sit still, you'll know what to do. Our society has this idea that we always have to be doing something, we always have to be fixing something, we always have to be, and you know what, no. I volunteer for an organization, and one of their guidelines is, at first, do nothing. Sit, let the sediment settle so that you can see clearly through the water, evaluate what's going on, and then consider action. But at first, do nothing. And that's such an, un-American, idea, philosophy. But I'll tell you what, you make less of a mess doing that. And it does make it easier to see what the appropriate choices are, what all of the choices are, if you just sit still for a moment. If you're always doing, you can't hear your higher self, you can't hear the gods, you can't hear your guidance because you're too busy muddying the water. Take the next few days and treat it like a dark moon. Sit still. Take care of things as they come up, do the next indicated action, but don't be trying to look 8 actions down the line. Don't be trying to fix things or make things happen. Sit. Breathe. Be. also just told me not to ask any questions. So, got anything else?
That's all I've got right now.
Okay. Yeah. It's not a time to be going out on vision quest unless your vision quest literally is like digging a hole and just hanging out. Kai apparently has opinions. She's one of the cats. Yeah.
Should we ask about what's going to happen later this month after Mercury goes direct?
Well, Mercury goes direct on the 12th, but we're in the shadow of Mercury retrograde until the 27th. So really, I mean, I don't think that June... Hi, don't do that. I don't think that June has much coming out of Mercury retrograde energy at all. I would just honestly consider that for most of June, you're still going to be under the influence of a Mercury retrograde, and so you're still going to be processing. It's fine. Just leave her. You're still going to be processing. The cat is trying to knock over the camera. I think she thinks we're done. Just know that, for most of June, you are still going to be processing. You're still going to be asked to be present. You're still going to be asked to be super conscious and super deliberate about everything that you do. And just to not get frustrated and not to feel like you need to start dashing forward. And most of the summer, honestly, feels like there's a lot more being and a lot less doing. So, yeah. All right. Have a great month.